Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. On today's tutorial, I'll be sharing with you a requested video of how to draft and sew a Queen Anne neckline corset with a turtle neckline. So if it's your first time viewing my channel, please hit on the subscribe button and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. So let's start. So I've gone ahead to mark my basic measurements, which is my shoulder to bust line, shoulder to underbust, shoulder to waist, and I marked 4 inches for my basque. So the next thing I'm going to do right now is to take my tape and I'm going to mark my shoulder divided by 2. My shoulder is 14 divided by 2. I have 7. From that point, I'm going to go down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope and I'm going to connect. After I'm done doing that, I'm going to place my tape and I'll find my chest line, which is my bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches, and I'll go ahead to make a mark across that point and I will label it as CL, meaning chest line. So that line I have at the shoulder, which is my shoulder divided by 2, which is 7, I'm going to mark it, place my tape, and I'm going to draw a straight line. So I'll be dividing what I have into 2. So dividing it into 2, I'm just going to go ahead and fold my tape, and at that point I'll come in by ½ inch. Now I'm going to take my French curve to draw my armhole, but before I do that, I'm going to mark my bust circumference divided by 4, and from that point I'm going to connect it by that ½ inch at the middle of the armhole, and I'm going to take it up. So after I'm done doing that, I'm just going to go ahead and mark my basic neckline, but I'm going to alter this later. So I'm going to mark 3 by 2 inches because I'm trying to create like a turtle neckline for this particular pattern. So the next step is to place my French curve and I'm going to draw out my neckline this way. So this is what I have, and I'm just going to go ahead and correct the neckline I have at this point. So after I'm done correcting it, I'm just going to go ahead and use my marker and I'm going to outline the neckline at this point. And I'll also go ahead to outline the shoulder point and the armhole area of this particular pattern. Next, I'm going to be marking my nipple to nipple divided by 2. I'll mark that at my chest line, at my bust line, at my under bust line, at my waistline, and at my basque length. So after I'm done doing that, I'm just going to take my ruler and I'm going to connect my line, following my chest line to the bust line, to the under bust line, to the waistline, and down to the basque line. Now to mark my dart intake, I'll just be marking 1 inch dart intake on both sides. So for a plus size, you're going to mark 1.5 inches. So I'm going to also mark it at my under bust. So after I'm done marking, I'm just going to take my ruler and I'm going to connect from my under bust down to my waistline and down to the basque length. On the other side also, I'm going to repeat the process by connecting from my underbust down to the waist and down to the basque. So you can use a diamond dart, but it is easier for a beginner to just sew a straight dart. So that's why most times I use a straight dart. So the next step is to draw your cup, connecting from your bust down to your under bust. So I'm just going to make use of this French curve and I'll connect it this way, and I'll place my French curve also, and I'm going to connect on the other side. So after I'm done connecting, I'm just going to go ahead and use my marker and I'm going to outline my pattern. Next, you're going to determine where you want your cup to start, and you're going to place your tape and you're going to measure about 1.5 or 2 inches. It totally depends on where you want your cup to start. You can also use more than that. So I'll go ahead and draw a line to serve as a guide at that point, and I'll extend my line to that point. So now the next thing I'll do is I'm going to go in by ½ inch at my chest line and I'm going to outline it at that point. So after I'm done doing that, I'm just going to go ahead and mark 1 inch dart at both sides of your cup, and I'm going to go ahead to connect also for my cup this way. So after I'm done connecting, I'm just going to go ahead and use my marker and I'm going to outline the cup at the upper part. So I'll place my French curve and I'm going to connect from that 1/2 inch from my chest line down to my under bust this way. So this is what I have for this part, and I'm going to place my French curve and connect from the upper part down to that chest line also. And I'm done cutting or marking out my cup for this part. So now the next step is to draw the cup for this side, but before I do that, you're going to first of all make sure that the yoke at this part is going to meet, and I'm going to make a point at that other part, and I'm going to connect from my cup down to that other point. So after I'm done connecting, the space I have between here and here, I will be sharing it into two, and I'm going to go ahead to place my tape and I will make a mark at that point. So from there I will place my French curve and I will go ahead to draw my cup for the other side also. So if you don't have a French curve, you can also go ahead to make a freehand sketch for your corset once you're good at drafting with a freehand sketch. And then I'm just going to go ahead to place my ruler my French curve this way, and I'm going to connect from the upper part down to the side for my cup. So right, you are trying to make this corset a 3-part corset. You can just go ahead and measure any part that you want the upper part or the 3-part corset to start from. So I'm just giving an example. It depends on what you want, but for mine, while looking at the thumbnail, you notice that the cup is a bit up, the 3-part corset is a bit higher. So I'll just go ahead and I will readjust my cup, and I'll just measure 2 inches from that point. So from that 2 inches, I'll just connect down to the point that I made earlier, which is on the bust line, so or 1/2 inch down the bust line, and I'm just going to draw. So this is my 3-part corset. The next step I'm going to take is to go ahead and I will label my cup. I'll label A, B, C and D. So while sewing, I'm going to merge the upper part of my cup. So now to draw the upper part of my dress, which is a Queen Anne neckline, I'm going to measure about 2.5 inches at the lower part. So at the upper part, for a normal Queen Anne neckline, you can just go in by 2.5 inches at the neckline this way, or you can just go ahead and measure about 3 inches and connect down to the cup part of your corset. But for this particular pattern, we are going to be having like a turtleneck on it. So from that point at the neckline, I'm just going to go ahead and mark about 0.75 inches towards the neckline. So after that, I'm just going to readjust it back to the Queen Anne neckline, and this is what we have at this point. And also at my neckline also, I'm going to go ahead and readjust it. So after that, I'm just going to go ahead to cut it off so that you won't get confused with the double lines I have at the neckline. Now is to insert my body measurement. So on this pattern, I won't be attaching my sewing allowance, so I'll be doing it directly on my fabric. So right now, I'm going to measure my bust circumference divided by 4, and I'm going to go ahead and mark that 2 inches that we took out from the cup. And after that, I'm going to mark whatever measurement I have at the chest line down to my bust line, because I used my bust circumference for that. And I'll go over to my under bust, mark my under bust circumference divided by 4, and I'll measure the 2 inches that, go down to my waist circumference divided by 4, and I'll mark that, and I'll mark my dart intake. So when I was marking, I mistakenly marked 1 inch, so I'm going to still correct it back later. So at the basque length, I marked my waistline because I'm still going to cut off my basque at that point. So I went ahead to replace that at the waistline, and I'm going to connect from my underbust line to my waistline down to my basque. So if you don't have the same pattern or the same shape, is not a problem. Everybody has different body shape. So after this, I'm going to go ahead and label this. So I was supposed to label C and S, and I mistakenly labeled S and C. So don't be confused about that. And after this, I'm going to go ahead to blend in my darts. So the reason why I'm doing this is I want to draw my dart. So when you're doing this, make sure the waistline at the other side of the pattern meets the waistline at the other side. That is the side with S and the side with C, before you can go ahead to mark your basque. So while marking that, you notice that at the waistline I didn't go in on a straight line just like I normally did, because I'll be doing that at the allowance of this dress. So after I'm done marking, this is what I have, and I'm just going to go ahead to cut out my pattern. So please, at this point, if you find this tutorial very interesting and educative, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button. If you haven't yet subscribed, give this video a thumbs up. So while cutting the neckline in front, I left that line because I'm going to use it as a guide to measure my turtleneck. Just like I said, if you haven't yet subscribed, please hit on the subscribe button. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you for supporting my channel. And this is what I have for the front pattern of this dress. Corset, I have gone ahead to mark my zipper, and I marked the neckline I used was 3 inches by 1 inch, and all the measurements started from the zipper allowance. To mark my armhole, I'm going to place it, divide it by 2, go in by ½ inch, and I'm going to draw my armhole curve. So next thing is to draw my dart intake. To mark my dart intake, I'm going to place my tape starting from my zipper, and I'm going to mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2. I'll go ahead and mark it at the chest line, at the bust line, at the under bust, and at the waist line. So after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to take my ruler and I'm going to draw a straight line. Next step is to measure from my shoulder to bust plus 1 inch. After making a mark at that point, I'm going to take my tape to the lower part and I'm going to mark ½ inch at both sides. So after marking ½ inch at both sides, I'm just going to connect it down to that shoulder to bust plus 1 inch mark that I made. Next is to insert my body circumference. At my bust, I'm going to mark my bust divided by 4 inches, and I'm going to mark. So after marking that, I'll just add my sewing allowance at 1.5 because I don't have any dart on top. And then I'll extend it to the chest line. At the under bust, I'm going to mark my under bust circumference divided by 4. After marking that, I'm going to mark the little dart intake, and I'll go ahead to mark my 1.5 sewing inch allowance. Going down to my waistline, I'm going to mark my waist circumference divided by 4, and I'll go ahead to measure this little dart intake I have at this point, and I'm going to mark it, then mark my 1.5 inch sewing allowance. Next step is to take my ruler and I'll connect all the lines that I have marked. So at my back pattern, I'll just outline my chest line. So I'll be creating a yoke for the upper part, and that is where it's going to start from. Next thing, I'm going to take my tape and I'll place it at this point and I'll measure ½ inch. So I'm going to create a loop at this part of the back. So from there, I'm going to connect it down to my chest line at that point. So from there, I'm going to connect it just like I said, and this is what I have at the back. So I also outlined my armhole area, and I'll extend that chest line down to the zipper part and outline my waist area. So for you not to get confused, I'm just going to extend the line I have at the upper part, but I'll be cutting it out when I'm sewing. So to get rid of the bulginess at the back, I'm going to go down and mark ½ inch, and at that point I'm going to extend it down to my zipper line. So I'll go ahead to outline my pattern. After that, I'm done with this particular pattern, and I'll go ahead to cut out my pattern. So after cutting up the upper, so at this point we have come to the end of today's tutorial. Please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and see you in our next video where we'll be sewing this particular pattern.